Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new video. Today we're going to be taking a look at this Hayter Heritage ST42 ride-on mower, which as you can see has been left outside and just generally abused, and we're going to see if we can get the engine running because it actually does have a decent engine. As you can see, it's an 18 horsepower Briggs & Stratton Intec twin overhead valve. I did just try and turn it over by hand and I can't get it to move, but that doesn't mean it's actually seized. So let's take a look. So just taking a closer look at it, you can see it is very weathered. Evidence that it has just been left out in the rain. The starter motor looks quite good. I'll check the oil in a minute or two. I notice this cover is off. There's the air filter. And we've had some snails in here. Lovely. Looks quite dirty down into the carburetor as well. But yeah, the point is it internally seized or is it just external? Because I've had these before where the coil will rust weld to the flywheel. And it's fairly easy to free it off. But obviously, many more checks have to be done. Just looking at the date code, that's the line of numbers at the bottom. This engine was built on the 10th of December 2001, which makes perfect sense because the ride-on mower was assembled in 2002. So it looks like it probably is original to the machine. You also may be wondering about the rest of the machine. It's pretty bad. I would love to get the engine running though, first of all, to see if the gearbox works. I think the gearbox is all still connected and everything, and all the belts are still running to it. So really, the engine is everything with this project. It's not a restoration, I must make that very clear. It's just a bit of fun to see if I can get it running, and if I'm extremely lucky, see if I can get it driving. But there is a chance this engine is completely seized and just not even worth bothering with. So the first check I'm going to make is the oil. The dipstick is showing the correct amount, but of course I mustn't ignore the fact that this mower is leaning quite drastically to one side because of the flat tyres. So potentially overreading. Just smell it. Oh, yeah, very strong smell of fuel. So there's a chance that the fuel has leaked into the engine through the carburetor. But yes, I'll be taking a full look at the carburetor in a minute anyway. So yeah, I want to get this top cover off as a priority. We need to have a look underneath there, see if we can see any reason why it is binding, because I can't turn that. There's a few bolts. We've got the fuel pump which needs to be removed, and then this should lift off. And for anybody wondering about my restoration projects, I have not stopped them. In fact, I'm going to be doing quite a lot. Way more restoration projects than these sort of will it run style videos. The reason why I'm doing this one now is just because I had this mower and I'm actually waiting on quite a lot of parts for one of my restoration projects. So yeah, there's going to be quite a few coming very soon, but the problem is with them, they take so long. And there's also these bolts, what's left of them, which hold the grill on the top, sort of finger guard. Take a look at that. Certainly a good home for spiders, but I don't know if we've had any mice. Hopefully no rodents have been in. So yeah, if I've got all the bolts, that should just lift off. And no mice have run out. Good, that's a good start. Okay then, so yeah, it looks like a popular place for snails. I'm sure we'll come across some. You can see evidence of them. It does look fairly promising. And as I mentioned, the coil, well there's two coils, but they look like they have rust welded to the flywheel due to lack of use and being in a very damp environment. I don't know when this last ran. In fact, I seem to remember vaguely that the person I got this from had said that the previous owner before him had used it. I think, I can't remember. It's sort of implying that it had run relatively recently, but yeah, I don't think it's run in the last 10 years. But then again, if it's left outside in a very damp environment, these things can deteriorate very fast. Before I do anything else, I'm just going to try and clean this up as much as possible. I'll try and vacuum all these bits out, and then I'll try and free off the flywheel, see if it is actually stuck on these coils. It's an improvement that is cleaner than it was before. So there's no loose bits now. Just going to take the spark plug out and take a look in the cylinders. Always a good idea to, if it hasn't run for a long time. I'm really hoping water hasn't got in, because if it has, that'd be pretty bad. The spark plug is obviously covered in carbon, but no rust. So that's a good sign. It does even smell of fuel. I'm going to put my inspection camera in. Wow, that looks really clean. I can see cross-hatching. There's no water, no fuel, not that much carbon. That's the piston directly in front of us. And then, yeah, we've got the cross-hatching on the cylinder wall. I can actually change the camera angle as well. So if I just hold this button down here, you can see we're now looking in a different direction, 90 degrees. And that's a valve just there. Let's see if we can see this valve is open. So there is a chance that is actually stuck. Until I turn the engine over, I'm not going to know for sure. That is the issue with leaving them. They can very easily get a stuck valve. Yep, you can really see that cross-hatching. I will check the other side as well. There does look to be a bit of water on that spark plug, on the electrode. And let's take a look inside. Oh, wow. So this is why you do check both sides. What we're looking at here is a cylinder full of oily water, essentially. So, yes, this is where the water's got to first. When it's entered through the intake. It's not a liquid cooled engine, so it's definitely coming through the air intake. But otherwise, it looks bad. But yes, it does look fairly clean again. Just change the camera. Because of the water, we do have a little bit of rust, but really not too much at all. That actually looks like condensation. It has been cold here every night for a month, so there will be quite a bit of condensation. It's been outside. Yeah. So really then, in this case, I need to clean that cylinder out. That is the priority. Spray some lubricating oil into there. And, well, actually, I can try and turn it over. It's not going to damage it, I don't think, to turn it over. Just very, very slowly. It would actually help massively if I can turn it over, because then we can sort of force the oily water towards the front and maybe suck it out. But I'm really hoping that this is where we're actually getting the binding, not something internal. At the moment it is just looking like an engine which has been left outside. It could be because the gearbox broke or something else. It might not have been just abandoned because the engine developed a fault. So I'll let that soak in a bit. just got a socket big enough. That's the biggest one I've got. Oh, yes. It's looking promising. I think if I just keep squirting some lubricating oil onto here. Once again, it's another engine which, another engine which has been left abandoned and then the flywheel has seized to those contacts. So now, yes, the focus is indeed on the oily water. Some of it might have squirted out. There's not enough space, I don't think, to get the sucker into there due to the angle. Try and blow it out. Yeah, that should work. That helped a little bit, but I have just made a much more interesting discovery. I was just taking a look underneath the top engine cover, and as you can see, this side, which is the right hand side when viewed from the seat, has got quite a lot of carbon and oil underneath the top cover, which makes me think it has a blown head gasket. And it would make perfect sense because there's oil in the cylinder, the water has just come through the carburetor, through the intake, so that's not really a concern, but the oil is a concern. And we're now going to do a test to see if it really does have a blown head gasket. The way I'm going to do this is by performing a leak down test, and really all we're doing is putting compressed air into the cylinder and looking to see where it leaks from, if it's going to leak. Some leakage is totally fine, that's totally normal, expected, but if it's excessive, we have an issue. So first things first, I need to turn the engine so we have the cylinder with the two valves closed, so top dead center. Now I've already done that and I've connected the pipe. So the next thing to do is to set up the leak down tester. I've actually run out of PTFE tape, so please do excuse the hissing sound. It won't affect the result. So we need to set this to 0. And then once it's set to 0, I plug it into the hose over here and we get the reading. Okay, we're about there. And as you can hear, we do have some leakage from the intake valve. Yeah, definitely leaking through the intake valve. The valves are shut. But as for a blown head gasket, it's looking less likely. As you can see, we've got moderate cylinder leakage. Sometimes I've actually been into the high before. Anything up to 40% considered low. We've got about 46 or 47%. I'll just remove the dipstick and see if I can hear anything or feel anything blowing out of here. There is a very, very slight breeze. So it can be worn rings, it could be the head gasket. I don't think the rings are worn. So it's looking likely that we definitely have a worn intake valve. It's not sealing correctly. I don't think there is an issue with the head gasket. Having said this, I've just put the inspection camera in there again before attaching the hose for this, and it looks terrible. It really is bad. It's so rusty. It's going to be hard to clean without taking the head off. We obviously have an issue with the intake valve. As for the oil, which was discovered under the cover, the top engine cover, or the shroud, It looks like this gasket here is leaking from the breather. By the look of it, it hasn't leaked for some time, although that could just be because the engine hasn't run for some time. So yeah, I think, just disconnect this, the best thing to do is going to be to do some work on this cylinder. Now you may think it's a bit crazy to try and start doing all this work to something which might not even run. But I would say it's even more crazy to try and run this engine without cleaning out in there and sorting the intake valve. I'm going to do a test on the other side as well, on cylinder number 1, and we'll see if we have any valve issues on that side. As I mentioned before, this other side is so much better. So there's a valve, which needs to get the engine to the correct position, on the right stroke. It needs to be the compression stroke at top dead centre. So there it is. Just see if I can see the other valve. There it is. So they are both closed, and I believe that is top dead centre. Just there. Okay. Once again, it's all set, so I can plug it in. Oh wow, very good. So we're getting a very impressive 13 or 14%. What an amazing result. So we have no problems on that side, good valves, and well, as you've seen, inside there it's absolutely spotless. It's like new. What I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the cylinder head for cylinder number 2. I'm going to clean out in there, clean the valves, relap them, possibly replace them if they're really bad, but hopefully they're not going to be as bad as that. I'm sure they won't be. Oh, and yeah, there's no point doing any work at all to cylinder number 1. You saw for yourself, it's really clean in there, really good leak down test result, so it would be a waste of time and resources to do it. So there we go, taking a look inside. As mentioned, it's starting to go rusty in the bore because of the water that's got in. There has been a bit of oil in there, but yeah, I think probably less oil than I thought. It is mostly water. There's no obvious place on the head gasket where it's blown. I don't think it has blown. The damage here, I believe, is from when I removed the head. This is where it tends to blow. Like I said, I don't think it's come past the rings. And there doesn't seem to be any excessive carbon. There's not much build up on here. It looks worse than it is. But now at least I can clean it properly, which I wouldn't have been able to do before. Here's a view of the head. Again, it's just dying for a clean. He's got a disgusting oily water out of there. Clean the carbon up. And there will also be a valve stem seal, which could actually be the cause of the oil. But we'll find out very soon. Okay, so let's take a look at these two valves. First of all, the intake valve, which has the rubber valve stem seal, looking nice and dry. So the seal is working correctly. Yeah, no oil has got past here. It's dry in there as well. So that leaves the exhaust valve, which does not have a seal. The reason for this is just because it is a rubber seal. The exhaust valve gets very hot, so it would just melt. And yes, there is a fair amount of oil in there. Don't know how well you can see. I'll try and get a light. As you can see in there, we do have some oil. But it's more impressive looking at the exhaust. There is oily soot leaking out of there. But obviously this engine has been standing for some time, so there was plenty of time for the oil just to seep past. We will just have to see how bad it is when the engine is running. Hopefully it won't be too bad at all. I can't really see any kind of wear or excessive wear on the valve. As for the guide, I will check that. Yeah, so we do have some wear, obviously. I could replace the valve. But yeah, as I said, this is a will it run video, and really it shouldn't be that bad. So I'm going to obviously clean the head up nicely. As I said, we're going to lap the valves, make them all good, put a new head gasket in, put a new valve stem seal in anyway for the intake, and reassemble it. That's looking much cleaner. The way I did this was just very simply in the hot washer, as you saw, and then I used a brass wire brush, and yeah, all the carbon came off very easily. It's amazing how just increasing the temperature of the degreaser can really help. So yeah, the other thing is I've just lapped in the intake valve, as you saw. It didn't really need doing. It was really good. So it could have just been a piece of carbon which was not allowing the valve to close fully before. And I need to do the exhaust valve, obviously. But overall, it's looking much better than it first seemed. So hopefully, once I've done all this work and put it back together, the engine will run very well and it won't burn oil. I don't think we should read too much into the oil in this cylinder. And that's the exhaust valve done as well. Much worse than expected. It's interesting that the intake valve was leaking badly on the leak down test, but the exhaust valve didn't really seem to be leaking at all. But yes, it's done. Took about 20 to 25 minutes to do that. And it can now be reassembled. I do need to put the new intake valve stem seal in, and yeah, I've cleaned all the surface up here so we can put the new gasket on, and the piston head on the engine. That is the head reassembled and refitted to the machine. The bore's been cleaned, everything's been cleaned. So now it's time to do another leak down test to see if I've improved it. I think we had about 47% before. So we're definitely looking for green. It has to be in the green. Ideally 30% and below. So let's take a look. Very good, just over 20%. So that's a huge improvement over what it was before. Definitely a good reading. So now I'm going to go and work on the carburetor, and that's going to be fun. Lots of cleaning to do. We have some leaves, and plenty of the silicone again. Seems to have got everywhere. So yeah, I've just got to get these leaves out of here, and I will fully dismantle it. I'll be putting it into the ultrasonic cleaner. Yeah, no way would this have worked without cleaning it. It's full of aluminium oxide and leaves and all kinds of dirt and grit, things that shouldn't be in there. I'll have to get some new gaskets as well. But yeah, let me just remove the bowl. We'll look in there as well. Oh look, it's all siliconed here as well. Wow. This thing's made of silicone. Right, well in that case it might have got into all the threads for these screws. I have to upgrade to my largest flathead screwdriver. There we go, that's got it, good. And they should really be replaced with new screws. Let's see what surprises we have in here. It's going to go with a bit of a pop, if it goes at all. Oh wow, they have really sealed this well. And there we have it. Filthy, really dirty, full of rust, old fuel, it smells terrible. Yep, this needs a really good clean. And it looks like the reason for putting all that silicone on here was just because they didn't want to buy a new bowl gasket. In fact, that applies for everything. They've just used this for everything, which is fine in some circumstances, but it can be a bit messy when you start using it in the carburetor. Not really ideal. So I will be cleaning this all up properly, getting the appropriate bowl gasket, which I know is still available, so that won't have been the reason for not getting a new one before. Absolutely full of silicone. Not where it belongs at all. It is amazing what some people will do. I think usually it's just to save a bit of money, but in the end you just start causing bigger problems, so it's not really worth doing that. You might as well just do it properly in the first place. But I think, yeah, it is going to be serviceable. I'm pretty sure this is not beyond repair. Just needs a really good clean. And I'll split this whole assembly so we can clean it properly. There we have the needle valve, which is looking corroded and a bit worn out. I'll change it. It's definitely worth changing because, as I said before, the oil smells like petrol, and that can be an issue with this needle valve or the seat. It can also be the float, like if the float is full of petrol, it's not working correctly, and it will continuously fill with fuel, causing it to overflow. But that seems to be okay. Can't hear anything in it, it doesn't seem to be perforated. I will be doing a check on it though. That seems good. I'm trying to get a good shot of inside the carburetor bowl. You can see all that gunk right down at the bottom. That is where the fuel solenoid is. think it is rust. Yeah, it's like jellified fuel mixed with rust. Got to be careful when removing the solenoid because we do have the jet incorporated into the nut. It will just fall out. And there we go. So that basically screws into there, but it sandwiches the bowl in between. So that needs to be all cleaned up. There's an O-ring on here. Probably, again, best to replace it. And then we have the solenoid. This is the anti-back fire solenoid. Or the fuel solenoid. It really depends what you want to call it. Underneath here there is a fairly unusual looking rubber gasket, which you don't necessarily have to replace, but I'm just going to replace it. It makes sense. If you're going to go in here, you might as well just change it. So yeah, this lifts off, and beneath here you can see that gasket. That is a single piece gasket, like a rubber O-ring. So I'm going to pick that out along with the bowl gasket. And there we have it. You can just see all this really slimy, sticky, old fuel in here. You can see we have these two vertical tubes. These are the emulsion tubes, and it's absolutely crucial that these are spotlessly clean. We also have the old bowl gasket, which obviously was not working, unless they just really loved silicone. I really don't know. Seems to be very withered. There we go. So there is another gasket that I want to remove. It's just behind here, and this can cause running problems if the gasket is faulty. The gasket can swell, and it can close little holes up and cause some very rich running. So I'm just going to first of all remove this plate, this butterfly. With the two screws removed, it will very simply lift out of there, but do take note of which holes the screws were going through. And you can see we then have the shaft. If I just zoom out a bit, there we go. That will very simply slide out of there. Again, take note of which way around it was. We have the flat side facing us. And you can see we have that screw down there with a little plastic piece. That can now be removed. Yes, everything is just so corroded. This carburetor really does need a full clean. And then we just need to lift this plastic piece out of here. It will be held in place by the gasket. So you can see the gasket is still in there, and yeah, the holes have swelled. I apologise for the poor lighting, so I'll just quickly zoom in there. So you can see we have got 6 holes, but sometimes when the gasket swells it does restrict the flow, and that causes running problems. So I'm going to pick that out and I'm going to replace it. And yeah, looking at that, I can imagine that if I was to clean this carburetor perfectly, we would still have engine running issues. So I'm now at the stage where I need to remove the top plate, and then I can put it into the ultrasonic cleaner, remove all the nasty gaskets, and give it a seriously good clean. This is the part where I need to be quite careful. It might be that the gasket's already damaged. Yeah, so it doesn't look that bad actually. That's the only gasket which I'm unsure about. I don't know if I can actually get it. I'm going to take a look. If it's very difficult to source, then, or impossible to source, then I won't be able to get it. But I'll give it a go. But it does actually seem to be reusable. That I don't think there's going to be any problems there. So you can see we've got the ports at the top here. A very good access point to clean these emulsion tubes. But first, let's just remove all this stuff and get it into the ultrasonic cleaner. Okay, so I've removed some. It's fairly tricky to remove it all. I'm going to use a plastic scraper on this once it's been in the hot water. Should make it easy to remove. And yeah, the same with the silicone around here. It should just heat up, go more malleable, and then should be able to pick it off. As for the other parts, I'm not surprised that these were leaking because these are absolutely rock hard. They've just solidified. Yeah. Yeah, they're not going to be serving much of a purpose. So, whether I like it or not, these will be changed. I don't mind. I love new parts. I think it's so good. It's good practice to fit new parts. But I know that those, for some reason, are extremely hard to source, at least in the UK. I think they're probably fairly readily available in the USA. All the carburetor bits are going to be going into the ultrasonic cleaner to begin with, followed by the plastic manifolds, because they're much dirtier and less important. I'm sorry, plastic manifolds. Everything that you can see here has been cleaned, including the carburetor bore, which I did have to sandblast in the end, just because the rust was so severe at the bottom. But it's not perforated, it is still strong. I've also cleaned the main jet, taken that out of the nuts just here, taken the rotten O-ring off there. Once again, rock hard. It's just serving no purpose whatsoever. That needs to be changed. Cleaned all the threads, float. I did actually fix the anti-backfire solenoid. It's now functioning correctly. It was getting jammed before because of all the sticky old fuel. And yeah, all the plastic parts have also been cleaned. They're a bit faded, but they are clean. So I just need to clean the main body. Again, I've managed to get most of the dirt off, but that silicone is just stubborn, so there might be the odd little piece here and there. But it's a huge improvement over what it used to be. Next is the bowl, but before I put it on, I do need to just mention that the nut has a specific way of going on. It can't be just put any way around because of the jet. It needs to face away from the float hinge, which I'll show in just a second. But also I have received lots and lots of parts, which I put an order in for a few days ago. Some of them were 2 weeks ago. I did manage to get the red O-rings for the intake manifold, so that's good news. And also got the float bowl gasket there, which was not hard to source, the float needle, which you've just seen, and all of the intake gaskets as well. There's a full kit here, so that's really good. So yeah, next is the float bowl. Need to get that sorted. So basically, this is symmetrical. All that matters is the jet on this nut. Needs to go the correct way around. So you can see here we have the float hinge. Essentially, the jet wants to face in that direction. So I'm going to put this into the bowl now. I'm going to attach the anti-backfire solenoid, and then it can be installed after putting the bowl gasket in. And there we have it. So now just the bowl gasket. It is important to always check the Briggs & Stratton manual to make sure you're buying the correct part for your engine. But if you have the same one that I do, it is part number 690991. 94. So hopefully that helps somebody out. Okay, so just install this. That's looking much cleaner. I'm almost ready to refit the carburetor, but before I do, I just need to explain the breather gasket. I have ordered it, but it's available for back order and it's going to be a while. So that's not going to turn up in time, unfortunately, but I think that one's going to be okay anyway. After all, it's just a bit of a test, this. As for the fuel tank, there wasn't one when I got the mower, so I've just created this fairly advanced contraption involving cable ties and a piece of wood, and essentially it's going to sit over the battery as the original one would have done. I'm going to have to replace that battery as well. I do have another used one somewhere because that one is completely dead. But yeah, this will just slide down here, something like that roughly. Obviously I can do it properly when I've got another hand free. There we go. So that's how I can position the fuel tank. It's looking good. As for the ignition, there's no ignition barrel, but I do have one. Here's the wiring. It's not terrible. Some of it's not great. But yes, I'll be able to switch the engine off on the key. Here is the ignition barrel. Got a spare one. And it will also be able to run, the battery will be able to run the anti-back fire solenoid, which I've also tested, and that works no problem at all. I won't be able to start the engine on the key because you can see the wiring is terrible. The solenoid will have had it. That's tucked down there behind the steering column. But we don't need it to work. I can just go straight to the starter motor with a jump pack. No problem at all. And then if I can get this engine running, I'll be able to test the charging system. We'll be able to see if it is charging. Again, it doesn't matter if it doesn't, because this is just a bit of a test, a bit of an experiment. But it might work. You never know. It will be interesting, very interesting to see. So that is the plan. I just need to get it all put back together, and then I think I can install my advanced fuel tank. And yeah. Oh, I mustn't forget to mention the oil. Now it does have oil in this engine. And it's actually got the right amount of oil in it too, surprisingly. Now I'm going to leave that in. The reason why is because I want, if it starts, I want it to circulate the oil. It wants to pick up any sludge at the bottom of the sump, and then we'll be able to drain it when it's hot. If we just drained it now, then it's just going to leave any sludge in there, and it won't actually do a thorough clean. So it's definitely best to run it first, especially with it not looking too bad. So I'll get it all reassembled. I have tested these two ignition cores as well using a multimeter, and they are both fine, so that's really good. So again, I think it's a case of something looking much worse than it actually is, although it's taken a bit of work. But yeah, it's not, hopefully not terrible. Okay then, here goes, the moment of truth. Is it going to work? I've got the doors open, I've got the extractor fan on, I'm going to put a respirator on as well. Let's just see if the engine runs. If it does, then I might even attempt to put the transmission into gear and see if it will move forwards and backwards. But yeah, one step at a time. Let's see if this engine will work. Okay, so here is a view underneath. You can see this is the clutch for the drive, and the belt has fallen off. So that is hopefully the reason why it's not driving properly. So I just need to put the clutch in somehow, need to hold it in and then put the belt back on. Right, we'll try that. The reason why it's hard to hold the clutch down is because the lever that you pull in to lock it has broken. That is much better. Nicely tensioned. Right, so this time it should drive properly. But yeah, the engine's looking good.